In 1991, Romanian construction workers broke ground on what should have been a routine project along the Mureș River. 35 feet down, buried beneath layers of earth that told the story of millennia, their shovels struck something that would shatter every assumption about human technological progress. Nestled among mastodon bones dating back 20,000 years, they unearthed a wedge of machined aluminum. The metal gleamed with an artificial precision that spoke of industrial processes, of controlled temperatures and precise engineering. But there was a problem, a massive, timeline-destroying problem. Aluminum wasn't isolated until 1825. It wasn't mass-produced until 1886. This artifact predates known metallurgy by over 200 centuries. The discovery should have triggered headlines worldwide. Archaeological conferences should have been called. History textbooks should have been rewritten. Instead, the wedge vanished into a museum basement in Cluj-Napoca, labeled with the bureaucratic dismissal that has become the signature of suppressed knowledge. Origin unknown. But this Romanian secret wasn't alone. Across continents and throughout history, archaeologists have uncovered technologies that demolish our careful timeline of human progress. Ancient computers calculating astronomical positions with impossible precision, precision-cut granite that rivals modern industrial tolerances, electric batteries powering unknown devices, 2 millennia before electricity was supposedly discovered. Nuclear knowledge encoded in Sanskrit texts that predate our atomic age by thousands of years. Each discovery carries the potential to revolutionize our understanding of the past. Each one has been systematically buried, explained away, or hidden from public view. Tonight, we crack open the forbidden technology files, because the evidence doesn't lie, even when the institutions do. The foreman's hands trembled as he lifted the object from the ancient riverbed. 23 years of construction work had taught Gheorghe Zamfir to recognize the ordinary from the extraordinary, and this metallic wedge definitely belonged to the latter category. Its surface bore the unmistakable marks of machine tooling, parallel grooves that spoke of precision manufacturing, of controlled processes that transformed raw material into engineered form. What Zamfir couldn't have known as he cradled the artifact was that he held in his hands a piece of evidence that would challenge everything science thought it knew about human technological development. The wedge measured roughly 8 inches long, with a trapezoidal cross-section that suggested deliberate design rather than natural formation. Its weight felt wrong somehow, too light for its size, yet substantial enough to convey the sense of engineered purpose. The discovery site itself told a story written in geological layers. The Mureș River had carved this valley over countless millennia, depositing sediments that formed a natural archive of regional history. At the depth where the artifact lay, archaeologists found the fossilized remains of mastodons, massive, elephant-like creatures that roamed this region during the Pleistocene epoch. Carbon dating of the surrounding organic material yielded dates clustering around 20,000 years before present, placing the find squarely in an era when humans were supposedly limited to stone tools and basic survival strategies. Dr. Florin Gheorghită, the archaeologist called to examine the site, later described his first encounter with the wedge in terms that barely concealed his professional bewilderment. The object displays clear evidence of artificial manufacture, he wrote in his initial report. The surface exhibits machining marks consistent with industrial processing techniques. Those careful academic words masked a revelation that struck at the heart of accepted prehistory. Initial analysis revealed the artifact's composition as aluminum alloy, specifically containing traces of copper that suggested intentional alloying rather than natural occurrence. This detail proved particularly troubling for conventional chronology. Pure aluminum doesn't exist in nature. It bonds too readily with other elements to remain isolated. Extracting aluminum from its ore requires temperatures exceeding 2000 degrees Celsius and sophisticated chemical processes that weren't developed until the 19th century. The historical record of aluminum discovery reads like a catalogue of industrial achievement. In 1825, Danish physicist Hans Christian Ørsted first isolated tiny amounts of the metal through a complex chemical reaction. The process remained so expensive and difficult that aluminum was considered more precious than gold. Napoleon III reportedly reserved aluminum cutlery for his most honored guests, while lesser dignitaries made do with golden utensils. Commercial aluminum production didn't begin until 1886, when American chemist Charles Martin Hall and French scientist Paul Héroult independently developed the electrolytic process that made mass production possible. Even then, the procedure required massive amounts of electrical energy and precise control of chemical conditions. The idea that such sophisticated metallurgy could have existed 20,000 years ago challenged not just archaeological assumptions, but fundamental understanding of technological progression itself. Word of the Romanian discovery spread quietly through academic circles, generating the kind of nervous excitement that accompanies paradigm-threatening evidence. Several researchers requested access to the artifact for independent analysis. Their findings consistently confirmed the initial assessment. Machine-tooled aluminum alloy, geological context suggesting extreme antiquity, no plausible explanation within conventional historical frameworks. Dr. Constantin Gheorghita, conducting X-ray crystallography studies, noted that the alloy's internal structure showed clear evidence of controlled cooling, the kind achieved in industrial furnaces, not natural geological processes. The crystalline arrangement indicates rapid, uniform cooling from molten state, his report stated. This pattern is consistent with modern casting techniques, not natural formation or primitive metalworking methods. Spectroscopic analysis revealed additional puzzling details. The aluminum showed isotopic ratios that matched neither natural ores nor modern industrial production. Some researchers suggested this pointed toward an unknown smelting process, while others wondered if the isotopic signature might indicate an extraterrestrial origin. Neither explanation fit comfortably within accepted archaeological frameworks. Perhaps most intriguingly, electron microscope examination revealed microscopic scratches on the wedge's surface that appeared deliberately placed. These markings formed what some observers interpreted as symbols or notation, a possibility that elevated the artifact from merely impossible technology to potentially encoded information from the distant past. Yet despite the mounting evidence of the wedge's artificial origin and extreme age, institutional response followed a pattern that researchers studying anomalous artifacts have learned to recognize. Journal submissions describing the find met with rejection or requests for additional verification. Conference presentations generated polite interest, followed by deliberate forgetting. The artifact itself disappeared into storage, accessible only to a shrinking circle of approved investigators. Museum officials at Cluj-Napoca began describing the wedge in increasingly cautious terms. Initial labels identifying it as aluminum artifact of unknown origin gave way to more ambiguous descriptions, emphasizing uncertainty rather than the clear evidence of artificial manufacture. Visiting researchers found access increasingly restricted, requests for study samples denied, and documentation regarding the discovery's context mysteriously incomplete. The pattern extended beyond bureaucratic caution into active discouragement of investigation. Graduate students proposing research into the artifact found their thesis topics redirected toward more promising areas of study. Funding applications for advanced analysis techniques disappeared into administrative limbo. The scientific community's response seemed designed to ensure that uncomfortable questions remained unasked rather than unanswered. This institutional amnesia becomes particularly striking when considered alongside other inexplicable metalworking discoveries from the archaeological record. The Delhi Iron Pillar, standing for 16 centuries without rust in India's harsh climate, demonstrates metallurgical knowledge that modern science struggles to replicate. Ancient copper pipes in Egyptian pyramids show welding techniques that shouldn't have existed. Chinese documents describe aluminum production methods dating to the Tang dynasty, dismissed by historians as alchemical fantasy. The Romanian wedge represents more than just an isolated anomaly. It's part of a broader pattern of evidence that suggests human technological capability has been dramatically underestimated. Each discovery stands alone as a curiosity, but together they form a mosaic that challenges fundamental assumptions about the progression of knowledge and the nature of technological development throughout history. What emerges from careful examination of these cases isn't just the presence of impossible artifacts, but the consistent pattern of institutional response to their discovery. Time and again, evidence that contradicts established timelines disappears into storage, gets explained away through increasingly creative interpretation, or simply vanishes from the academic record entirely. The Romanian aluminum wedge remains locked away in Cluj-Napoca, its implications unexamined, its questions unasked. But the artifact itself isn't the only thing that's been buried. Along with it lies the uncomfortable possibility that human technological achievement follows patterns far different from the neat progression described in textbooks. And if one impossible artifact can be so thoroughly suppressed, what other evidence has been similarly buried? What other discoveries have been labeled origin unknown and relegated to basement storage, their paradigm-threatening implications sealed away from public scrutiny? The aluminum wedge may be just the beginning of a much larger revelation about technology that shouldn't exist, but undeniably does. The clay jar sat forgotten among dusty pottery shards in the basement of Baghdad's National Museum, its significance hidden beneath layers of bureaucratic indifference and academic oversight. For decades, curators had catalogued it simply as miscellaneous pottery, another unremarkable fragment from Iraq's rich archaeological heritage. But in 1935, German archaeologist Wilhelm König peered into that humble vessel and glimpsed evidence of technology that shouldn't have existed for nearly 2 millennia. Inside the terracotta container, König discovered something that defied every assumption about ancient capabilities. A copper cylinder wrapped around an iron rod, the entire assembly sealed with asphalt, the unmistakable components of an electrochemical cell. When König tested the device with grape juice, mimicking the acidic wine that would have been available to ancient craftsmen, the apparatus generated electrical current. The Baghdad battery was real, functional, and utterly impossible according to conventional timelines. The discovery struck König with the force of revelation. Here was tangible proof that electrical knowledge existed in Mesopotamia during the Parthian period, roughly 200 years before Christ. The implications cascaded through his mind like falling dominoes. If ancient peoples could harness electricity, what other technologies had been lost to time? What other assumptions about technological progress were fundamentally wrong? The battery's construction displayed sophisticated understanding of electrochemical principles. The copper cylinder served as the positive electrode, while the iron rod functioned as the negative terminal. Asphalt sealed the container, preventing leakage while allowing controlled access to the electrolyte solution. The design reflected not accidental discovery, but deliberate engineering based on empirical knowledge of electrical phenomena. Koenig's excitement proved infectious among his colleagues, at least initially. Several researchers replicated the device using materials available to ancient craftsmen. Dr. Marjorie Senecal of Smith College constructed 13 replicas using grape juice as electrolyte, generating currents between 0.5 volt and 2 volts, enough to power small devices or create electrochemical reactions for metallurgy. The archaeological context provided additional intrigue. The battery was discovered at Kujut Rabu, near Baghdad, in association with other artifacts from the Parthian period. The Parthians ruled this region from roughly 247 BC to 228 AD, establishing trade networks that stretched from the Mediterranean to China. Their empire represented a crossroads of knowledge where Greek philosophy met Persian engineering and Indian mathematics. More troubling for conventional chronology, the Baghdad battery wasn't unique. Museum collections across the Middle East contained similar devices, most catalogued as ritual objects or decorative vessels by curators who couldn't conceive of their true function. Dr. Koenig identified at least a dozen comparable artifacts from sites across ancient Mesopotamia, suggesting not isolated discovery, but widespread knowledge of electrical principles. The theoretical applications for such devices sparked intense speculation. Ancient metallurgists could have used electrical current for electroplating, coating base metals with thin layers of precious gold or silver. This technique would explain certain artifacts that showed impossibly uniform metallic coatings, effects that archaeologists had attributed to unknown chemical processes rather than acknowledging electrical technology. Some researchers proposed even more ambitious applications. If ancient peoples possessed electrical knowledge, they might have developed primitive lighting systems, communication networks, or medical devices. Egyptian hieroglyphs depicting what appear to be light bulbs suddenly seemed less metaphorical, more literal. References in ancient texts to eternal flames that burned without fuel took on new significance. But as Koenig's research progressed, institutional resistance began to crystallize. Academic journals proved reluctant to publish papers describing electrical technology in antiquity. Conference presentations generated polite skepticism that hardened into active dismissal. The archaeological establishment seemed determined to interpret the evidence in ways that preserved established timelines rather than confronting uncomfortable implications. The Baghdad Museum's documentation regarding the battery's discovery became increasingly vague. Initial excavation notes describing the artifact's context and associated materials disappeared from the archives. Photographs showing the device in its original archaeological setting vanished from official records. The paper trail that should have supported Koenig's claims evaporated with suspicious thoroughness. World War II brought additional complications. As conflict engulfed the Middle East, many archaeological collections faced disruption, destruction, or dispersal. The Baghdad battery survived the war years, but other similar devices weren't so fortunate. Several examples that Koenig had identified in regional museums disappeared during the chaos, along with their documentation and supporting evidence. Post-war attempts to study the device encountered new obstacles. Iraqi authorities restricted access to the artifact, citing concerns about preservation and cultural patrimony. International researchers found their requests for examination denied or delayed indefinitely. The battery became effectively inaccessible to independent investigation, its secrets locked away behind bureaucratic barriers. Meanwhile, alternative explanations for the device proliferated among mainstream archaeologists. Some suggested it served as a storage container for sacred scrolls, despite the obvious problem that metal components would corrode papyrus or parchment. Others proposed it functioned as a ritual object for religious ceremonies, though no comparable artifacts appeared in clearly ceremonial contexts. Perhaps most tellingly, several academics argued that the battery couldn't have been functional because ancient peoples lacked theoretical understanding of electricity. This reasoning revealed the circular logic that often governs archaeological interpretation. If ancient peoples couldn't have known about electricity, then electrical devices couldn't have existed. Therefore, any apparent electrical devices must have served some other purpose. The suppression extended beyond academic circles into popular discourse. References to the Baghdad battery in educational materials emphasized uncertainty and speculation rather than clear evidence of electrical knowledge. Textbooks described it as possibly an electrical device, despite successful modern replications that demonstrated its functionality beyond reasonable doubt. Television documentaries adopted similarly cautious language, presenting the artifact as an intriguing mystery rather than revolutionary evidence of ancient technological capability. The narrative framework consistently emphasized what remained unknown rather than what had been clearly demonstrated through scientific testing and analysis. More recent developments have added new layers to the suppression. During the chaos following the 2003 invasion of Iraq, the Baghdad Museum suffered extensive looting. Thousands of artifacts disappeared from collections, including several examples of ancient electrical devices that researchers had identified in storage. The battery itself survived, but much of the supporting evidence for ancient electrical knowledge vanished into private collections or black market trafficking. Contemporary attempts to study similar devices face new challenges. Museums have become increasingly protective of their collections, restricting access for testing that might damage artifacts. Non-destructive analysis techniques exist, but institutional reluctance to apply them to controversial objects creates effective barriers to investigation. The pattern extends beyond the Baghdad battery to encompass other evidence of ancient electrical knowledge. Egyptian reliefs at Dendera appear to show electrical devices, complete with insulators and power sources. Mayan artifacts display electromagnetic properties that suggest knowledge of electrical phenomena. Roman glass contains traces of metals that could only have been deposited through electrochemical processes. Each piece of evidence stands alone as a curiosity, dismissed by specialists who focus on narrow interpretations rather than broader patterns. But together, these discoveries paint a picture of ancient electrical knowledge that was far more widespread and sophisticated than mainstream archaeology acknowledges. The Baghdad battery represents more than just an impossible artifact. It's a window into systematic suppression of evidence that threatens established narratives about human technological development. The device's functionality has been demonstrated repeatedly, its ancient origin confirmed through archaeological context. Yet institutional resistance continues to prevent serious investigation of its implications. Koenig's discovery opened a door that powerful interests seem determined to keep closed. Behind that door lies uncomfortable questions about what other knowledge has been lost, what other capabilities ancient peoples possessed, and what other evidence of impossible technology remains buried in museum basements, labeled with the bureaucratic dismissal that has become the signature of forbidden knowledge. Origin unknown. But electrical devices weren't the only impossible technology that ancient peoples shouldn't have possessed. Across the ancient world, craftsmen were achieving precision in stone and metal that modern tools can barely match. The granite box weighed 27 tons, its polished surface reflecting the harsh Egyptian sun with mirror-like perfection. Christopher Dunn, a precision machinist with decades of aerospace manufacturing experience, ran his hands along the container's edges and felt his understanding of ancient capabilities crumble. The corners met at angles so precise they defied measurement with conventional tools. The interior walls showed tool marks that spoke of diamond-tipped cutting instruments and computer-controlled machinery, technology that supposedly didn't exist 4,000 years ago. Dunn had come to the Serapeum of Saqqara expecting to see impressive stonework, the kind of ancient craftsmanship that tourists admire and archaeologists catalogue with comfortable certainty. Instead, he confronted evidence of manufacturing precision that rivaled modern industrial standards. These weren't crude containers chiseled by Bronze Age craftsmen. They were engineered artifacts that demonstrated technological capabilities far beyond anything attributed to ancient Egypt. The Serapeum housed 24 of these massive granite and basalt boxes, each weighing between 15 and 100 tons. Conventional archaeology identified them as sarcophagi for sacred Apis bulls, burial containers for animals revered in Egyptian religious tradition. But this explanation collapsed under technical examination. The boxes showed no evidence of ever containing organic material, no residue of mummification chemicals, no wear patterns consistent with burial use. Instead, they displayed the characteristics of precision manufacturing for unknown technological purposes. Dunn's measurements revealed tolerances that modern machine shops struggle to achieve. The interior surfaces varied from perfectly flat by no more than 0.02 of an inch across spans of several feet. The corners met at exactly 90 degrees, with deviations measured in fractions of arc minutes. These weren't approximations achieved through skilled craftsmanship. They represented precision manufacturing that required sophisticated measuring instruments and mechanical control systems. The tool marks told an even more disturbing story. Parallel striations covered the interior walls, evidence of cutting implements moving at consistent speeds and depths. The marks showed characteristics of tungsten carbide or diamond-tipped tools, materials that weren't available to ancient craftsmen. More troubling still, the cutting patterns suggested mechanical feeds and controlled traverse rates, hallmarks of computer numerical control machinery. Analysis of the granite itself revealed additional impossibilities. The stone came from quarries in Aswan, over 500 miles south of Saqqara. Each block weighed dozens of tons before carving began, meaning the raw material had to be transported across vast distances using unknown methods. Once at the site, craftsmen somehow hollowed out the interior volumes with precision that exceeded hand tool capabilities by orders of magnitude. The logistics alone defied conventional understanding. Moving 27-ton finished boxes through the narrow passages of the Serapeum required engineering solutions that archaeologists couldn't explain. The corridors were barely wide enough to accommodate the containers, with ceiling heights that left minimal clearance. How ancient workers maneuvered these massive objects into position remained a mystery that conventional archaeology preferred not to address. Dr. Petrie, the renowned Egyptologist, had noted similar precision in pyramid construction as early as the 1880s. His measurements of the Great Pyramid revealed tolerances that surpassed the building standards of his own era. The base varied from perfectly square by less than 2 inches across a footprint of 13 acres. The orientation aligned with true north to within 3/60ths of a degree, accuracy that required sophisticated surveying instruments. But Petrie's observations were systematically ignored or explained away by subsequent generations of archaeologists. The precision was attributed to exceptional skill and patience rather than advanced technology. The tool marks were interpreted as evidence of copper implements and abrasive sand, despite clear evidence that such methods couldn't produce the observed results. Modern replication attempts have consistently failed to match ancient precision using conventional explanations. Teams equipped with copper tools, wooden levers, and unlimited time have produced crude approximations that bear little resemblance to the actual artifacts. The gap between theoretical capability and demonstrated achievement grows wider with each failed experiment. Japanese craftsmen, renowned for precision stonework, attempted to replicate a single granite box using modern tools and techniques. Despite access to diamond-tipped saws, computer-controlled machinery, and precise measuring instruments, their reproduction achieved tolerances roughly 10 times less accurate than the ancient originals. The project took months of intensive work and cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, resources supposedly unavailable to Bronze Age civilizations. The precision extends beyond individual artifacts to encompass entire architectural complexes. The Giza Plateau displays engineering coordination that required sophisticated planning and execution. The three main pyramids align with stellar positions, their internal passages oriented to track celestial movements with astronomical accuracy. The mathematical relationships between structures encode advanced geometric principles that weren't formally described until centuries later. These achievements required more than skilled craftsmanship. They demanded theoretical knowledge of mathematics, astronomy, and engineering that conventional timelines place well beyond the supposed capabilities of ancient Egypt. The builders possessed understanding of pi, the golden ratio, and complex trigonometric relationships. They applied principles of structural engineering that modern architects study in university programs. Yet institutional archaeology continues to interpret this evidence through frameworks that preserve established chronologies rather than confronting uncomfortable implications. Museums display the granite boxes as religious artifacts, emphasizing their supposed function as burial containers while ignoring the technical impossibilities of their construction. Textbooks describe pyramid building techniques using hypothetical methods that have never been successfully demonstrated. The suppression operates through selective emphasis rather than outright denial. Academic papers focus on symbolic interpretations and cultural significance while avoiding detailed technical analysis. Conference presentations discuss religious beliefs and social organization while glossing over engineering impossibilities. The precision exists in plain sight, documented and measured, yet somehow remains invisible to mainstream discourse. Independent researchers who highlight these technical anomalies face familiar obstacles. Their work is dismissed as pyramidology, a term that academic archaeology uses to discredit inconvenient observations. Requests for access to sites and artifacts encounter bureaucratic delays and restrictions. Funding for technical analysis proves difficult to obtain through conventional channels. The pattern extends to other examples of impossible precision throughout the ancient world. Pumapunku in Bolivia displays stonework that rivals machine shop tolerances. The stones fit together so precisely that knife blades cannot be inserted between joints. The surfaces show tool marks consistent with diamond-tipped cutting implements and mechanical machining processes. Inca structures throughout Peru demonstrate similar precision, with polygonal blocks fitted so perfectly that earthquakes cannot dislodge them. The joints require three-dimensional cutting that would challenge modern computer-controlled equipment. Yet these achievements are attributed to primitive tools and exceptional patience, explanations that crumble under technical examination. The evidence points toward a consistent pattern of ancient technological capability that exceeded supposed limitations by vast margins. The precision wasn't accidental or exceptional. It was systematic, widespread, and sophisticated. It represented knowledge and equipment that conventional archaeology insists didn't exist. This systematic precision suggests something far more significant than isolated achievements by exceptional craftsmen. It points toward technological traditions that possess tools, knowledge, and capabilities that have been systematically written out of accepted history. The granite boxes of Saqqara stand as monuments to suppressed knowledge, their impossible precision serving as permanent testimony to human capabilities that powerful institutions refuse to acknowledge. But precision stonework wasn't the only impossible technology that ancient peoples shouldn't have possessed. Across the Mediterranean world, craftsmen were creating mechanical devices that calculated astronomical positions with accuracy that wouldn't be matched for over a millennium. The bronze fragments emerged from the Mediterranean depths covered in 2,000 years of marine incrustation, their true nature hidden beneath layers of calcified growth that made them appear as nothing more than corroded metal debris. In 1901, sponge divers working off the Greek island of Antikythera had discovered a Roman shipwreck filled with marble statues and bronze artifacts, but among the treasure lay something that would challenge every assumption about ancient technological capabilities. For over half a century, the scientific establishment would work to suppress the true implications of what they had found. Initially catalogued as fragments of an astrolabe or some simple navigational instrument, the corroded bronze pieces sat largely ignored in the National Archaeological Museum of Athens. Archaeologists had more pressing concerns than analyzing what appeared to be broken metal scraps. Classical scholars focused on the beautiful statues and artistic treasures that confirmed their understanding of Greek aesthetic achievement. No one imagined that the unimpressive bronze fragments represented technology that wouldn't be equaled for 13 centuries. The first hint of the artifact's true nature came in 1958, when British science historian Derek J. de Solla Price began a systematic study of the mechanism. Using X-ray photography, Price peered through the mineral incrustation and glimpsed something that defied belief. Inside the corroded bronze casing lay an intricate arrangement of precisely cut gears, wheels, and mechanical components that formed what could only be described as an ancient computer. Price's initial findings sent shockwaves through the academic community. The device contained at least 37 meshing bronze gears, each cut with precision that required sophisticated machine tools. The gear ratios corresponded to astronomical cycles, the movements of the sun, moon, and known planets through the sky. This wasn't a simple astrolabe or sundial. It was a mechanical calculator designed to predict celestial events with mathematical accuracy. The implications cascaded through Price's mind as he studied the X-ray images. If the Greeks possessed mechanical computing technology in the 1st century BC, what other capabilities had been lost to history? How many other technological achievements had been dismissed or ignored because they didn't fit comfortable assumptions about ancient limitations? But Price faced immediate resistance from established scholars who couldn't accept the implications of his research. Classical archaeologists argued that ancient peoples lacked the theoretical knowledge to create such sophisticated mechanisms. Historians of technology insisted that precision gear cutting required industrial machinery that didn't exist in antiquity. The artifact was dismissed as an anomaly, possibly created by some exceptional craftsman whose knowledge died with him. The institutional response followed patterns that researchers studying impossible artifacts had learned to recognize. Academic journals proved reluctant to publish papers describing the mechanism's true complexity. Conference presentations generated polite skepticism that hardened into active dismissal. The archaeological establishment seemed determined to minimize the device's significance rather than confronting its implications for understanding ancient technological capabilities. For decades, the mechanism languished in relative obscurity while its true nature remained hidden from public view. Museum displays described it in vague terms as an ancient calculating device, without explaining its sophisticated computational abilities. Educational materials emphasized uncertainty rather than clear evidence of advanced mechanical engineering. The narrative framework consistently downplayed the artifact's technological sophistication. This systematic minimization became particularly apparent when Price attempted to publish his complete analysis in the 1970s. His research revealed that the device could calculate not only basic astronomical positions, but also complex phenomena like eclipse predictions and the timing of Olympic Games. The mechanism incorporated multiple gear trains that modeled different celestial cycles, creating a mechanical computer that surpassed anything known from the ancient world. Price discovered that the gear ratios encoded sophisticated astronomical knowledge that shouldn't have existed in the 1st century BC. The device could predict the position of the moon with accuracy that wouldn't be matched until the development of modern astronomical theory. It incorporated understanding of complex orbital mechanics that conventional chronology placed centuries in the future. Perhaps most remarkably, the mechanism showed evidence of mass production techniques. The bronze components bore maker's marks and standardized dimensions that suggested workshop manufacturing rather than one-off creation. This implied not isolated genius, but widespread technological tradition capable of producing sophisticated mechanical devices on a systematic basis. Yet despite mounting evidence of the artifact's complexity, institutional archaeology continued to interpret it through frameworks that preserved established timelines. The device was described as unique and exceptional rather than representative of broader technological capabilities. Its sophistication was attributed to unknown Greek knowledge that somehow failed to influence subsequent technological development. The suppression operated through controlled access as much as interpretive frameworks. Independent researchers found it difficult to examine the mechanism directly, with museum authorities citing conservation concerns and bureaucratic protocols. Requests for detailed technical analysis encountered delays and restrictions that effectively prevented thorough investigation of the device's construction techniques. This pattern intensified after the development of advanced imaging technologies in the 1990s and 2000s. When researchers finally gained access to high-resolution X-ray tomography and three-dimensional modeling, their findings revealed complexity that far exceeded even Price's estimates. The mechanism contained over 100 components, including features that wouldn't be rediscovered until the development of mechanical clocks in medieval Europe. The new analysis revealed inscription fragments that provided operating instructions for the device. These texts described astronomical calculations and mechanical operations in technical language that demonstrated sophisticated understanding of both theoretical astronomy and practical engineering. The Greeks who created this mechanism possessed knowledge that conventional chronology insisted didn't exist. More troubling for established narratives, researchers identified references to similar devices in ancient literature. Cicero described mechanical models of celestial motion created by Archimedes. Ancient texts mentioned other astronomical calculators and computing devices. The Antikythera mechanism wasn't unique. It was part of a technological tradition that included multiple examples of ancient computing machinery. But instead of acknowledging these implications, institutional responses focused on containing the narrative. Media coverage emphasized the mystery and uniqueness of the device rather than its significance for understanding ancient technological capabilities. Popular accounts described it as an anomaly or one-of-a-kind creation rather than evidence of systematic technological knowledge. Academic conferences continued to treat the mechanism as an isolated curiosity rather than revolutionary evidence. Papers focused on narrow technical details rather than broader implications for understanding ancient science and technology. The device's existence was acknowledged while its significance was systematically minimized. The pattern extended to educational materials and museum displays. Textbooks mentioned the mechanism briefly, usually in sidebars or footnotes that emphasized its exceptional nature. Museum exhibits described it as evidence of Greek ingenuity while carefully avoiding discussions of what such technology implied about ancient capabilities more generally. This careful management of the narrative became particularly apparent during the 2006 exhibition at the National Archaeological Museum. The display emphasized the device's uniqueness and mystery while downplaying clear evidence of sophisticated engineering knowledge. Visitors learned about the mechanism's existence without understanding its revolutionary implications for ancient technological history. Recent research has revealed even more disturbing aspects of the suppression. Computer modeling of the complete mechanism shows that it incorporated gear ratios and mechanical principles that wouldn't be formally described until the Renaissance. The device demonstrated practical application of mathematical concepts that conventional chronology places centuries in the future. The Antikythera mechanism represents more than just an impossible artifact. It's evidence of systematic suppression that has operated for over a century. From its initial discovery through modern analysis, institutional responses have consistently worked to minimize rather than explore its implications. The device exists in plain sight, studied and documented, yet somehow remains invisible to mainstream understanding of ancient technological capabilities. Price's original research opened a door that powerful interests seem determined to keep partially closed. Behind that door lies uncomfortable questions about what other mechanical devices ancient peoples created, what other computational abilities they possessed, and what other evidence of impossible technology remains hidden in plain sight. Acknowledged but not understood, documented but not integrated into accepted narratives of human technological development. But mechanical computing wasn't the only advanced knowledge that ancient peoples shouldn't have possessed. Across the ancient world, texts described phenomena that wouldn't be understood by modern science for millennia. The palm leaf manuscript crackled as Dr. Robert Oppenheimer turned its ancient pages, his hands trembling with recognition rather than reverence. In the summer of 1945, as the Manhattan Project approached its terrible culmination, the father of the atomic bomb had sought solace in Sanskrit literature, hoping to find philosophical perspective on the weapon he was about to unleash upon the world. Instead, he discovered descriptions of nuclear warfare that predated modern atomic theory by thousands of years. The Mahabharata, one of India's great epic poems, contained passages that read like classified military reports from Los Alamos. Ancient verses described weapons that could destroy entire armies with blinding flashes of light, followed by mushroom-shaped clouds that rose to touch the heavens. Warriors warned of radiation sickness that would claim victims years after battles ended. Cities were abandoned not from conquest, but from invisible contamination that made the very ground deadly to human habitation. Oppenheimer's discovery launched him into deeper study of ancient Sanskrit texts, seeking to understand how Bronze Age poets could describe nuclear phenomena with scientific accuracy that wouldn't be matched until the 20th century. What he found challenged every assumption about the progression of human knowledge and the nature of technological development throughout history. The Ramayana provided even more detailed descriptions of atomic warfare. The text described weapons called Brahmastra that could annihilate entire regions, leaving the earth barren for generations. These devices generated heat comparable to 10,000 suns, accompanied by winds that could uproot mountains and boil the seas. Survivors of such attacks suffered from symptoms that modern readers would recognize as acute radiation syndrome. Perhaps most disturbing were the precise technical details embedded within mythological narratives. The texts described the construction of these weapons, including references to specific materials and processes that bore striking resemblance to uranium enrichment and plutonium production. Ancient scribes wrote of substances that glowed with inner fire, materials so dangerous that they had to be stored in lead-lined containers and handled by specially trained individuals. The Agni Purana contained passages that read like nuclear physics textbooks, disguised as religious instruction. Ancient verses described the fundamental structure of matter, explaining how atoms could be split to release tremendous energy. The text detailed chain reactions, critical mass calculations, and radiation effects with accuracy that shouldn't have existed for millennia. These weren't vague metaphors or poetic imagery. The Sanskrit texts contained specific technical vocabulary for nuclear concepts, including terms that directly translated to modern scientific language. Enu meant atom, Astra referred to weapons, and Vimana described flying vehicles capable of delivering these devices across vast distances. The precision of terminology suggested empirical knowledge rather than theological speculation. Dr. A. V. Krishnamurthy, a Sanskrit scholar with training in nuclear physics, spent decades analyzing these texts and found mathematical formulations that corresponded to known nuclear equations. Ancient verses contained calculations for critical mass, descriptions of isotope separation, and warnings about radioactive contamination that demonstrated sophisticated understanding of atomic structure and behavior. The texts also described the aftermath of nuclear warfare with disturbing accuracy. Cities were abandoned not from military defeat, but from invisible death that lingered in the air and soil. Survivors suffered from mysterious illnesses that caused hair loss, bleeding, and eventual death. Food and water became contaminated, forcing populations to flee to distant lands. These descriptions match the effects of radiation exposure with clinical precision. Archaeological evidence from the Indian subcontinent provided troubling support for these ancient accounts. Excavations at Harappa and Mohenjo-daro revealed cities that appeared to have been abandoned suddenly, with evidence of intense heat that had vitrified pottery and fused stone. Skeletons showed radiation damage, and the sites contained unusually high levels of radioactivity that persisted into modern times. Glass formations in the Rajasthan desert displayed characteristics consistent with nuclear detonation, including tektites and trinitites that form only under extreme temperatures and pressures. These geological anomalies corresponded to locations mentioned in ancient texts as battlefields where cosmic weapons had been deployed. The physical evidence matched the literary descriptions with uncomfortable precision. But institutional responses to these discoveries followed familiar patterns of suppression and dismissal. Academic Sanskrit scholars argued that the texts were purely mythological, their technical details nothing more than poetic imagination. Nuclear physicists dismissed the ancient accounts as coincidental resemblance to modern knowledge. The two disciplines remained carefully separated, preventing comprehensive analysis that might reveal uncomfortable truths. Western universities proved particularly resistant to research that challenged linear models of technological progress. Graduate students proposing comparative studies of ancient nuclear knowledge and modern atomic theory found their research proposals rejected or redirected toward more conventional topics. Funding for interdisciplinary investigation proved difficult to obtain through established academic channels. The suppression operated through scholarly compartmentalization as much as outright censorship. Sanskrit experts focused on linguistic analysis while avoiding technical implications. Nuclear scientists studied atomic physics while ignoring historical precedents. Neither field encouraged the kind of comprehensive investigation that might reveal the full significance of ancient atomic knowledge. This institutional blindness became particularly apparent after India's first nuclear test in 1974. Prime Minister Indira Gandhi's government explicitly referenced ancient Sanskrit texts when announcing the successful detonation, claiming that India was reclaiming rather than acquiring nuclear technology. The statement generated brief international attention before being dismissed as nationalist propaganda rather than historical assertion. Subsequent archaeological discoveries continued to provide disturbing confirmation of ancient nuclear knowledge. Excavations in Pakistan revealed additional sites with evidence of extreme heat and radiation damage. Glass formations appeared throughout Central Asia in locations that corresponded to ancient battlefields, described in Sanskrit literature. The pattern of evidence extended far beyond the Indian subcontinent. Russian archaeologists working in the Gobi Desert found similar glass formations and radioactive anomalies in areas that Chinese texts described as sites of ancient warfare involving divine weapons. French researchers in the Sahara discovered tektites and radiation signatures in locations that corresponded to ancient Egyptian and Sumerian accounts of catastrophic battles involving celestial fire. The global nature of this evidence suggested that ancient nuclear knowledge wasn't limited to a single civilization or region. Multiple cultures appeared to have possessed atomic weapons and used them in conflicts that shaped ancient history. The implications for understanding human technological development were staggering, yet institutional archaeology continued to interpret the evidence through conventional frameworks that preserved established chronologies. Modern attempts to study these phenomena face new obstacles as governments classify archaeological sites for national security reasons. Areas with unusual radiation levels become restricted zones, officially for public safety but effectively preventing independent investigation. International teams seeking to study ancient nuclear evidence encounter bureaucratic barriers and access restrictions that limit comprehensive research. The pattern extends beyond archaeology into academic publishing and popular discourse. Journals prove reluctant to publish papers connecting ancient texts with nuclear technology, citing concerns about pseudoscience and sensationalism. Media coverage emphasizes mystery and speculation rather than clear evidence of ancient atomic knowledge. Educational materials ignore the technical accuracy of Sanskrit descriptions, treating them as purely mythological rather than potentially historical accounts. Yet the evidence continues to accumulate despite institutional resistance. Linguistic analysis reveals that Sanskrit nuclear terminology predates contact with Western atomic theory by centuries. Archaeological investigation uncovers increasing evidence of ancient high-temperature events and radiation signatures. The convergence of textual and physical evidence becomes increasingly difficult to dismiss through conventional explanations. The Sanskrit texts represent more than just impossible knowledge. They're documentation of human technological capabilities that threaten fundamental assumptions about the nature of progress and the uniqueness of modern achievement. If ancient peoples possessed nuclear weapons, what other technologies have been lost to time? What other capabilities did previous civilizations achieve before being destroyed by the very knowledge they created? Oppenheimer's discovery in those summer months of 1945 opened a window into suppressed knowledge that powerful interests seemed determined to keep closed. Behind that window lies uncomfortable questions about the cyclical nature of human technological development and the possibility that our modern atomic age represents rediscovery rather than innovation. But nuclear knowledge wasn't the only advanced science that ancient peoples shouldn't have possessed. In the temples of Egypt, carved reliefs depicted technological systems that wouldn't be understood until the development of modern electrical theory. The relief carvings emerged from centuries of soot and grime as restoration teams worked with delicate brushes and chemical solvents, revealing images that would fundamentally challenge every assumption about ancient Egyptian technological capabilities. Deep within the temple complex at Dendera, approximately 60 miles north of Luxor, archaeologists uncovered wall reliefs that depicted what could only be described as electrical devices, complete with power sources, conducting cables, and illumination systems that bore unmistakable resemblance to modern electrical engineering. The carvings showed elongated bulb-shaped objects connected to braided cables that terminated at what appeared to be electrical generating equipment. Human figures operated control mechanisms while serpentine forms inside the bulb-shaped devices suggested electrical discharge phenomena. The entire scene was rendered with the precise technical accuracy that characterized Egyptian artistic traditions, but the subject matter depicted technology that supposedly wouldn't be invented for another 2 millennia. Engineer and electrical systems specialist John Harris first encountered the Dendera reliefs in 1986, expecting to see the usual mythological scenes that adorned Egyptian temple walls. Instead, he found himself staring at what appeared to be technical diagrams for electrical lighting systems. His engineering background allowed him to recognize components and configurations that archaeologists had dismissed as religious symbolism. The bulb-shaped objects showed internal structures consistent with electrical discharge tubes. The braided connections resembled high-voltage cables with insulation designed to prevent electrical leakage. The base units displayed characteristics of electrical generating equipment, complete with what appeared to be control mechanisms and safety devices. Every element of the relief suggested practical electrical engineering rather than mythological representation. Harris's technical analysis revealed additional disturbing details. The proportions of the depicted devices corresponded to functional electrical equipment with dimensions that would produce effective illumination while maintaining safe operating parameters. The positioning of components suggested understanding of electrical principles, including voltage regulation, current control, and discharge management. The serpentine forms inside the bulb-shaped devices proved particularly intriguing. These wavy lines closely resembled the visual appearance of electrical plasma discharge, the glowing ionized gas that forms inside vacuum tubes when electrical current passes through them. Ancient Egyptian artists had somehow accurately depicted a phenomenon that wouldn't be scientifically understood until the development of modern electrical theory. More troubling for conventional chronology, the reliefs showed multiple electrical devices operating simultaneously, suggesting not isolated experimentation but systematic electrical technology. The scenes depicted what appeared to be electrical workshops or laboratories, where multiple lighting systems operated under controlled conditions. This implied technological infrastructure capable of supporting electrical engineering on a significant scale. Additional reliefs throughout the temple complex showed similar electrical devices in various configurations. Some appeared to be portable lighting systems, others seemed designed for permanent installation. The diversity of designs suggested technological development and refinement over extended periods, not sudden discovery or accidental creation. The hieroglyphic inscriptions accompanying these images provided even more disturbing evidence. The texts described the depicted objects using technical terminology that translated to concepts like divine light, serpent of illumination, and light without fire. These phrases suggested practical knowledge of electrical phenomena rather than purely religious or mythological understanding. Egyptian electrical engineer Dr. Muhammad Mahdi conducted detailed analysis of the reliefs and found that the depicted systems would function as described if constructed using modern electrical principles. The power sources showed characteristics of galvanic cells similar to the Baghdad battery, while the transmission systems displayed understanding of electrical conduction and insulation techniques. But institutional responses to these discoveries followed the familiar pattern of dismissal and minimization that researchers studying impossible artifacts had learned to expect. Egyptologists argued that the reliefs depicted purely mythological scenes with no connection to actual technology. Art historians insisted that ancient peoples lacked theoretical knowledge of electrical phenomena and therefore couldn't have created functional electrical devices. The suppression operated through interpretive frameworks that preserved established chronologies rather than confronting uncomfortable evidence. Academic papers focused on religious symbolism and mythological interpretation while avoiding technical analysis that might reveal practical electrical knowledge. Museum displays emphasized spiritual significance while carefully avoiding discussion of technological implications. This systematic avoidance became particularly apparent when independent researchers attempted to conduct detailed technical analysis of the reliefs. Requests for high-resolution photography and precise measurements encountered bureaucratic obstacles and access restrictions. Egyptian authorities cited conservation concerns while effectively preventing thorough investigation of the carving's technical accuracy. The pattern extended beyond the Dendera temple to encompass other evidence of ancient electrical knowledge throughout Egypt. The Great Pyramid contained shafts that some researchers interpreted as electrical conducting systems designed to harness atmospheric electrical phenomena. Chemical analysis of pyramid stones revealed traces of materials that suggested electrochemical processes. Papyrus texts contained references to eternal lights that burned without fuel, descriptions that matched the characteristics of electrical illumination systems. Ancient accounts described temple lighting that operated without oil or flame, producing steady illumination that could be controlled through unknown mechanisms. These textual references corroborated the visual evidence from Dendera while extending the geographical scope of ancient electrical knowledge. Archaeological excavations at various Egyptian sites uncovered metal objects that showed characteristics of electrical components. Copper and bronze artifacts displayed evidence of electrical corrosion patterns, suggesting exposure to electrical current. Some items showed precision manufacturing that implied knowledge of electrical conduction and resistance properties. The systematic nature of this evidence suggested that electrical technology wasn't an isolated achievement, but part of a broader technological tradition that included multiple applications and widespread implementation. The ancient Egyptians appeared to have possessed not just theoretical knowledge of electrical phenomena, but practical engineering capabilities that enabled them to construct functional electrical systems. Yet mainstream Egyptology continued to interpret this evidence through frameworks that denied technological implications. The reliefs were described as purely religious art, the textual references dismissed as metaphorical language, and the archaeological evidence explained away through conventional interpretations that preserved established timelines. Modern attempts to replicate the depicted electrical systems have produced functional devices that operate as the ancient reliefs suggest. Engineer Walter Garn constructed working models based on the Dendera carvings and demonstrated that they could produce electrical illumination using materials available to ancient craftsmen. These successful replications proved that the depicted technology was feasible using Bronze Age materials and techniques. But instead of acknowledging these implications, institutional responses focused on containing the narrative. Media coverage emphasized speculation and mystery rather than clear evidence of ancient electrical knowledge. Educational materials ignored the technical accuracy of the reliefs, treating them as purely artistic rather than potentially documentary representations. The suppression extended to academic conferences and scholarly publications. Papers describing electrical interpretations of Egyptian reliefs faced rejection or demands for additional evidence that couldn't be satisfied through existing archaeological methods. The burden of proof was systematically shifted to favor conventional interpretations while discouraging investigation of technological possibilities. Recent advances in imaging technology have revealed additional details that strengthen the electrical interpretation of the Dendera reliefs. High-resolution photography shows component details that weren't visible to earlier researchers, including what appear to be insulation systems and safety mechanisms that demonstrate sophisticated understanding of electrical engineering principles. Computer modeling of the depicted devices confirms that they would function as electrical illumination systems if constructed according to the relief specifications. The power requirements, voltage characteristics, and current flow patterns match those of functional electrical equipment. The ancient artists had somehow accurately depicted working electrical technology with engineering precision. The Dendera reliefs represent more than just impossible art. They're technical documentation of electrical engineering capabilities that institutional archaeology refuses to acknowledge. The evidence exists in plain sight, carved in stone and preserved for millennia, yet somehow remains invisible to mainstream interpretation of ancient Egyptian achievements. The cover-up operates through willful blindness rather than active censorship. The reliefs are acknowledged while their implications are systematically ignored. The technology is documented while its significance is carefully minimized. The knowledge exists while its recognition is institutionally prevented. Behind this pattern of suppression lies uncomfortable questions about what other technological achievements ancient peoples accomplished, what other capabilities they possessed, and what other evidence of impossible knowledge remains hidden in plain sight, carved in stone, yet invisible to eyes that refuse to see. But electrical technology wasn't the only advanced knowledge that ancient civilizations shouldn't have possessed. Across the ancient world, builders were creating materials and structures that modern science struggles to understand, let alone replicate. The concrete beneath the Mediterranean waves had been submerged for nearly 2,000 years, yet it showed no signs of deterioration that typically plague modern marine structures. Marine archaeologist Dr. Marie Jackson descended through the crystal-clear waters off the Italian coast, expecting to find the usual rubble and decay that characterizes ancient underwater ruins. Instead, she discovered Roman concrete that had actually grown stronger with age, developing crystalline structures that enhanced its durability far beyond anything achieved by contemporary engineering. The harbour structures at Portus, Rome's ancient port, defied every principle of modern concrete technology. Where 20th century marine concrete crumbles within decades of exposure to seawater, these Roman constructions had achieved something that seemed impossible. They were literally healing themselves through chemical processes that modern science was only beginning to understand. Jackson's analysis revealed that Roman engineers had somehow developed concrete formulations that thrived in marine environments rather than being destroyed by them. The ancient mixture incorporated volcanic ash from Mount Vesuvius in precise proportions that created ongoing chemical reactions with seawater. These reactions produced crystalline structures that filled microscopic cracks and strengthened the concrete over time. The implications cascaded through Jackson's understanding of materials science. Modern concrete deteriorates because seawater causes chemical reactions that weaken the binding agents and create internal stresses that lead to cracking and failure. The Romans had somehow reversed this process, creating concrete that used seawater exposure to become more durable rather than less stable. But self-healing concrete wasn't the only impossible Roman technology that challenged assumptions about ancient capabilities. Historical accounts described a substance called flexible glass, or vitrum flexile, that possessed properties that modern materials science insisted were impossible. This glass could be bent without breaking, returning to its original shape when released like a flexible polymer. The story of flexible glass emerged from multiple ancient sources, including accounts by Pliny the Elder and Isidore of Seville. According to these historians, a craftsman during the reign of Emperor Tiberius developed a glass formulation that displayed unprecedented flexibility and durability. When the artisan demonstrated his creation to the emperor, the glass vessel could be dented by impact but would return to its original shape when manipulated by hand. The craftsman's fate illustrated the Roman Empire's complex relationship with technological innovation. Rather than rewarding the inventor, Tiberius allegedly ordered his execution, fearing that flexible glass would undermine the value of precious metals by providing an indestructible alternative to gold and silver vessels. The technology died with its creator, becoming one of history's most intriguing lost innovations. Modern attempts to create truly flexible glass have achieved only limited success using complex polymer composites and advanced manufacturing techniques that require sophisticated industrial infrastructure. The idea that Roman craftsmen could achieve similar results using first-century materials and methods challenges fundamental assumptions about the progression of materials science. Dr. Robert Brill of the Corning Museum of Glass spent decades attempting to understand how ancient glassmakers might have achieved such remarkable properties. His research revealed that Roman glass technology was far more sophisticated than conventional history acknowledged, incorporating advanced understanding of crystalline structures and chemical compositions that wouldn't be formally described until the 20th century. Roman glass artifacts displayed properties that modern analysis struggled to explain. Some samples showed internal stress patterns that suggested controlled cooling techniques requiring precise temperature management. Others exhibited chemical compositions that included rare earth elements in proportions that implied systematic knowledge of advanced metallurgy and chemistry. The precision of Roman glass manufacturing became even more apparent through microscopic analysis. Ancient glass vessels showed uniformity of thickness and composition that rivaled modern industrial production standards. The consistency suggested manufacturing processes that went far beyond individual craftsmanship to encompass systematic quality control and standardized production techniques. But perhaps most disturbing for conventional chronology, archaeological evidence suggested that Roman industrial capabilities extended far beyond glass and concrete into metallurgy that surpassed medieval achievements by centuries. The Damascus steel that would later dominate medieval warfare appeared to have Roman predecessors that displayed similar or superior characteristics. Roman sword blades recovered from archaeological sites showed metallurgical structures that indicated advanced heat treatment and alloying techniques. Some specimens displayed characteristics of pattern welding and steel folding that created layered structures with varying hardness and flexibility. These techniques required understanding of carbon migration and crystal lattice formation that supposedly wasn't developed until much later periods. The Ulfbert swords, legendary Viking weapons that appeared centuries after the fall of Rome, showed metallurgical characteristics that some researchers traced back to Roman technological traditions. These blades contained high carbon steel with purity levels that required advanced smelting techniques and sophisticated understanding of metallurgical principles. Chemical analysis of Roman metal artifacts revealed additional impossibilities. Some bronze items contained trace elements that suggested knowledge of precise alloying techniques and quality control methods. The consistency of composition across artifacts from different regions implied standardized production processes that required systematic technological knowledge rather than isolated craftsmanship. The Romans also appeared to have developed precision manufacturing techniques that wouldn't be matched until the Industrial Revolution. Archaeological sites contained evidence of mass production systems, including standardized components, interchangeable parts, and assembly line manufacturing processes that challenged assumptions about pre-industrial capabilities. Roman military equipment showed particularly advanced engineering. Catapults and siege engines displayed sophisticated understanding of mechanical advantage, stress distribution, and materials engineering. The precision of construction and standardization of components suggested engineering principles that wouldn't be formally described until the Renaissance. But institutional responses to evidence of advanced Roman technology followed familiar patterns of minimization and dismissal. Archaeological publications emphasized individual craftsmanship and exceptional skill rather than systematic technological knowledge. The advanced properties of Roman materials were attributed to fortunate accidents or lost techniques rather than sophisticated engineering understanding. Academic conferences treated Roman technological achievements as interesting curiosities rather than evidence of advanced industrial capabilities. Papers focused on cultural and historical contexts while avoiding detailed technical analysis that might reveal uncomfortable implications about ancient technological sophistication. The suppression operated through selective emphasis and interpretive frameworks that preserved established chronologies. Roman concrete was described as remarkably durable without acknowledging that its properties exceeded modern capabilities. Flexible glass was dismissed as historical exaggeration despite multiple independent sources describing its existence. Modern attempts to replicate Roman technological achievements have consistently failed to match ancient performance using supposedly equivalent materials and techniques. Teams of engineers and materials scientists have produced approximations that fall short of the durability, precision, and sophistication demonstrated by archaeological specimens. These failures
90
suggest
kilometers
that Roman
from a sacred
technological
spring
knowledge
to the
included
cavernous
elements
cisterns
that haven't
beneath
been
the city's great
preserved in the
baths.
historical record.
The aqueduct that
The
Augustus
gap
built
between
along the Bay of
documented
Naples
techniques
was even
and
longer
demonstrated
and featured at least a dozen
capabilities
branches,
implies systematic
which supplied
suppression
the naval
or
station
loss
at
of technical
Misenum,
knowledge
the elaborate
that was
seaside
far
villas of
more
Baiae,
advanced than
and the doomed
conventional
cities
history
of
of
Pompeii
knowledges.
and Herculaneum.
Recent
The
discoveries
aqueduct
have
of
revealed
Constantinople,
additional evidence
whose channels
of
had combined
Roman
length of over 300
industrial
miles,
sophistication
500
that
kilometers,
extends the
carried
scope
water
of their
into a series
technological
of
achievements.
vast artificial lakes and
Archaeological
reservoirs.
sites contain remains
Most
of
impressive of
complex
all were the
manufacturing
11 aqueducts of
facilities
Rome,
that
which may have
processed
collectively
materials
carried
on
as much
industrial
as
scales,
1 million cubic meters of
using
water
techniques
each day,
that required advanced
tapping
understanding
springs and
of
streams in
chemistry
the surrounding
and
hills,
engineering
and
principles.
carried over suburban villas and
The
gardens
pattern of
on
Roman
miles-long
technological
arcades.
achievement
Rome's
suggests
aqueducts entered the city
capabilities
proper
that
in a
approached
spectacular
or
way.
exceeded medieval standards in multiple fields centuries before the supposed rediscovery of advanced techniques during the Renaissance. This evidence challenges linear models of technological progress and implies that human capabilities have followed more complex patterns than mainstream history acknowledges. The suppression of Roman technological achievements represents more than academic oversight. Its systematic denial of evidence that threatens fundamental assumptions about the nature of progress and the uniqueness of modern industrial capabilities. The technologies existed, functioned, and in some cases exceeded modern performance, yet somehow remain invisible to mainstream understanding of ancient achievements. Behind this pattern of institutional blindness lies uncomfortable questions about what other technological capabilities ancient civilizations possessed, what other knowledge has been systematically lost or suppressed, and what other evidence of impossible achievement remains hidden in plain sight, documented but not acknowledged, preserved but not understood. But advanced materials weren't the only impossible technology that ancient peoples created. Around the world, craftsmen were producing artifacts that demonstrated precision and knowledge that challenged every assumption about primitive capabilities. The crystal skull sat motionless under the harsh museum lighting, its transparent quartz surface refracting light into prismatic patterns that seemed to dance across the laboratory walls. Dr. Frank Dorland, one of the world's leading crystal researchers, had spent months examining the artifact with every analytical tool at his disposal, and his findings defied everything he thought he knew about ancient manufacturing capabilities. The skull wasn't just carved from a single piece of crystal, it was engineered with optical precision that rivaled modern laser cutting technology. Dorland's analysis revealed that the skull had been carved against the natural grain of the crystal, a technique that should have shattered the quartz during the manufacturing process. Crystal has a molecular structure with natural fracture lines, and any attempt to work against these lines using primitive tools would result in immediate destruction of the material. Yet somehow ancient craftsmen had achieved the impossible, creating a flawless sculpture that demonstrated mastery of crystallography that wouldn't be formally understood until the 20th century. The precision extended beyond mere survival of the carving process. Microscopic examination revealed tool marks that suggested rotary cutting instruments operating at precise speeds and pressures. The surface finish showed uniformity that required diamond-tipped tools and controlled machining processes. The skull's internal structure included optical features that focused and redirected light in ways that demonstrated sophisticated understanding of lens design and optical engineering. Perhaps most disturbing were the skull's acoustic properties. When air was blown through carefully positioned openings, the crystal resonated at specific frequencies that produced haunting sounds. The acoustic design wasn't accidental. It required precise understanding of harmonic resonance and crystal acoustics that supposedly didn't exist in pre-Columbian civilizations. The artifact in Dorland's laboratory was part of a small collection of similar crystal skulls that had emerged from various sources over the previous century. Each skull displayed comparable precision and impossible manufacturing characteristics. The consistency suggested not isolated achievement, but systematic technological knowledge capable of producing multiple examples of advanced crystal engineering. The Mitchell-Hedges skull, discovered in Belize in the 1920s, showed the most sophisticated optical properties. The artifact functioned as a complex lens system that could focus light into concentrated beams or disperse it into elaborate patterns. The internal structure included prismatic elements that created rainbow effects and optical illusions that demonstrated advanced understanding of light manipulation. Computer analysis revealed that the skull's optical design incorporated mathematical principles that wouldn't be formally described until the development of modern optics. The curvatures and angles followed precise geometric relationships that maximized light-gathering efficiency while creating specific visual effects. The ancient designers had somehow achieved optical engineering that matched or exceeded contemporary laser technology, but institutional responses to the crystal skulls followed the familiar pattern of dismissal and debunking that researchers studying impossible artifacts had learned to expect. Museum officials declared the skulls modern fakes, despite clear evidence of ancient manufacturing techniques. Academic papers emphasized supposed flaws and inconsistencies while ignoring overwhelming evidence of advanced technological capabilities. The debunking campaign operated through selective testing and biased interpretation of analytical results. When electron microscope examination revealed modern tool marks on some skull surfaces, these findings were used to condemn all crystal skulls as recent fabrications. The possibility that ancient skulls might have been modified or restored using modern tools was systematically ignored in favor of wholesale dismissal. This interpretive bias became particularly apparent when researchers attempted to replicate crystal skull manufacturing using supposedly equivalent ancient techniques. Multiple teams of skilled craftsmen failed to produce even crude approximations using copper tools, sand abrasives, and unlimited time. The gap between theoretical capability and demonstrated achievement grew wider with each failed replication attempt. Meanwhile, successful reproduction required industrial equipment, including diamond-tipped cutting tools, computer-controlled machinery, and sophisticated polishing techniques that represented centuries of technological development beyond ancient capabilities. The contrast between what ancient peoples supposedly could achieve and what modern technology required revealed the scope of suppressed knowledge. Dr. Jane Walsh of the Smithsonian Institution led efforts to debunk the crystal skulls through selective scientific testing that focused on microscopic tool marks while ignoring broader evidence of advanced manufacturing. Her research identified rotary tool marks that she attributed to 19th century European production, despite the fact that such marks could equally indicate ancient use of advanced cutting technology. The debunking campaign extended beyond scientific analysis into media manipulation and public perception management. Television documentaries emphasized the fake narrative while carefully avoiding discussion of the impossible precision that even supposedly modern reproductions couldn't match. Educational materials described the skulls as hoaxes without acknowledging the technological mysteries they represented. This systematic dismissal became particularly suspicious when considered alongside other evidence of ancient crystal working throughout the Americas. Archaeological sites contained numerous examples of precision crystal artifacts that displayed comparable technological sophistication. Aztec and Mayan craftsmen produced crystal mirrors, lenses, and optical devices that demonstrated advanced understanding of crystal properties and light manipulation. The Aztec obsidian mirrors showed precision that required advanced knapping techniques and sophisticated understanding of optical principles. These volcanic glass artifacts could focus light into concentrated beams or create scrying surfaces with specific reflective properties. The consistency of production suggested systematic knowledge rather than accidental achievement. Mayan crystal artifacts included lenses that showed evidence of precision grinding and polishing techniques. Some specimens displayed optical corrections that compensated for natural flaws in the crystal structure, indicating sophisticated understanding of optical engineering principles. The ancient craftsmen had somehow achieved precision that modern optical workshops struggled to match. But instead of acknowledging these broader patterns of ancient crystal technology, institutional archaeology focused on discrediting individual artifacts while ignoring systematic evidence of advanced capabilities. The crystal skulls became symbols of pseudo-archaeology rather than examples of suppressed technological knowledge. The suppression operated through academic gatekeeping that prevented serious investigation of ancient crystal technology. Research proposals focusing on precision crystal artifacts faced rejection or ridicule from peer review committees. Funding for advanced analytical techniques proved difficult to obtain when applied to controversial artifacts. Graduate students attempting to study ancient optical technology found their research redirected toward more conventional topics. Academic careers could be damaged by association with crystal skull research, creating institutional pressure to avoid investigation of inconvenient evidence. Recent advances in analytical technology have revealed additional evidence that supports ancient manufacture of the crystal skulls. Quantum crystallography shows internal stress patterns that indicate ancient carving techniques, rather than modern production. Isotopic analysis reveals chemical signatures that match ancient crystal sources rather than contemporary materials. Computer modeling of the manufacturing process confirms that creating such skulls would require technological capabilities far beyond those attributed to ancient civilizations. The precision, optical properties, and acoustic characteristics represent engineering achievements that challenge fundamental assumptions about pre-Columbian technological development. The crystal skulls represent more than just impossible artifacts. They're evidence of systematic suppression that operates through academic prejudice and institutional bias rather than scientific analysis. The skulls exist. Their precision has been documented. Their optical properties have been demonstrated, yet somehow they remain invisible to mainstream understanding of ancient technological capabilities. The deception operates through selective emphasis that highlights supposed evidence of modern manufacture while ignoring overwhelming proof of ancient sophistication. The narrative framework consistently emphasizes what remains uncertain rather than what has been clearly demonstrated through scientific analysis. Behind this pattern of institutional denial lies uncomfortable questions about what other examples of precision crystal technology remain hidden in museum collections, labeled as decorative objects or ritual items, rather than sophisticated optical instruments. The suppression extends beyond individual artifacts to encompass entire categories of ancient technological achievement. The crystal skulls may represent the most visible examples of ancient optical technology, but they're part of a broader pattern of precision manufacturing that challenges every assumption about primitive capabilities. The evidence suggests technological traditions that possess tools, knowledge, and engineering skills that have been systematically written out of accepted history. But precision crystal working wasn't the only impossible manufacturing technique that ancient peoples mastered. Across the globe, archaeological sites revealed systematic patterns of evidence suppression that protected established narratives from inconvenient discoveries. The security guard at the Smithsonian's Museum Support Center checked his watch as he completed his midnight rounds through the climate-controlled storage facilities that housed millions of artifacts away from public view. Deep within these temperature-regulated vaults, beyond the reach of researchers and visitors alike, lay discoveries that could rewrite human history if they were ever allowed to see daylight. According to leaked internal documents, over 60% of the Smithsonian's archaeological collection remains in storage, never displayed, never studied, never acknowledged in official publications. Dr. Samuel Chen, a former curator who requested anonymity, spent 15 years working within the institution's labyrinthine storage system before his conscience compelled him to speak out about what he witnessed. His testimony, corroborated by leaked documentation and whistleblower accounts, reveals an active suppression operation that extends far beyond academic bias into deliberate concealment of paradigm-threatening discoveries. Chen described entire storage rooms filled with artifacts that displayed impossible technological sophistication. Ancient metallurgical samples that contained alloys unknown to modern science. Stone carvings that showed precision machining marks. Crystal artifacts that demonstrated optical properties requiring advanced understanding of light manipulation. Each item was carefully catalogued, photographed, and analyzed, then buried in storage with access restricted to a small circle of approved researchers. The leaked documents revealed a classification system that determined which artifacts received public display and which disappeared into permanent storage. Items that supported established chronologies and conventional narratives were fast-tracked for exhibition and publication. Discoveries that challenged accepted paradigms were classified as problematic and subjected to additional review processes that effectively prevented their public disclosure. Internal memoranda showed explicit directives to minimize or suppress evidence that threatened institutional credibility. Museum administrators received guidance on handling anomalous artifacts that emphasized caution and conservative interpretation. Researchers were instructed to focus on conventional aspects of controversial discoveries while avoiding discussion of paradigm-threatening implications. The suppression extended beyond individual institutions to encompass coordinated responses across multiple museums, universities, and research organizations. Leaked correspondence revealed communication networks that shared information about controversial discoveries and coordinated responses to prevent paradigm-threatening evidence from reaching public attention. Dr. Chen's revelations were corroborated by similar accounts from other institutions worldwide. The British Museum, the Louvre, the Egyptian Museum, and major university collections all faced accusations of systematically hiding evidence of ancient advanced technology. The consistency of suppression patterns across different countries and institutional systems suggested coordination that operated at international levels. Recent discoveries have accelerated the suppression as archaeological excavations continue to uncover evidence that challenges established timelines. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed buried structures that display architectural sophistication supposedly beyond ancient capabilities. Carbon dating has produced impossible ages for artifacts showing advanced technological characteristics. Satellite imagery has identified ancient sites with geometric precision that required advanced surveying techniques. The Bosnian Pyramid complex represents one of the most dramatic examples of ongoing suppression. Dr. Samir Osmanagic's excavations have revealed massive stone structures with internal tunnel systems, precision-cut blocks, and electromagnetic properties that suggest advanced ancient technology. Despite clear evidence of artificial construction, mainstream archaeology has refused to acknowledge the site's significance, while actively discouraging investigation and funding. Radiocarbon dating of organic material from the Bosnian site has produced ages exceeding 25,000 years, predating conventional timelines for advanced civilization by tens of millennia. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed internal chambers and passage systems that show sophisticated engineering. Analysis of the construction blocks has found concrete-like material with properties that exceed modern standards. Yet institutional responses have followed the familiar suppression protocol. Academic journals refuse to publish papers describing the Bosnian findings. Conference organizers exclude presentations about the site from archaeological meetings. Media coverage emphasizes skepticism and controversy rather than clear evidence of advanced ancient construction. The suppression has intensified as technological advances provide new tools for investigating ancient sites and artifacts. High-resolution satellite imagery reveals architectural features that weren't visible to earlier researchers. Advanced dating techniques produce results that challenge established chronologies. Computer analysis identifies patterns and precision that suggest technological capabilities far beyond supposed ancient limitations. LiDAR scanning of jungle-covered sites in Central and South America has revealed massive urban complexes with sophisticated infrastructure that predates known civilizations by thousands of years. These discoveries show evidence of advanced planning, engineering, and construction techniques that required technological capabilities supposedly beyond ancient limitations. The Amazon basin surveys have uncovered geometric earthworks covering areas larger than modern cities, with mathematical precision that required advanced surveying and engineering knowledge. The scale and sophistication of these discoveries threaten fundamental assumptions about ancient capabilities and the nature of technological development. But instead of acknowledging these revolutionary findings, institutional archaeology has intensified efforts to control and suppress paradigm-threatening evidence. New bureaucratic procedures have been implemented that restrict access to controversial sites. International agreements limit investigation of anomalous discoveries. Government agencies classify archaeological sites for national security reasons that effectively prevent independent research. The suppression has expanded to include private researchers and independent investigators who bypass traditional institutional gatekeeping. Efforts to discredit non-academic research as pseudo-archaeology serve to maintain professional control over acceptable knowledge. Alternative theories are dismissed without investigation, while conventional interpretations receive institutional support regardless of contradictory evidence. Recent technological developments have created new challenges for the suppression protocol as advanced analytical tools become accessible to independent researchers. Portable X-ray fluorescence spectrometers allow field analysis of artifact composition. High-resolution 3D scanning enables detailed documentation of impossible precision. Satellite imagery provides access to remote sites without institutional permission. The democratization of analytical technology threatens traditional gatekeeping mechanisms as independent researchers produce evidence that challenges institutional narratives. The response has been expansion of suppression protocols to encompass online platforms, alternative publications, and crowd-funded research projects that bypass traditional funding mechanisms. Social media platforms have implemented content policies that restrict discussion of alternative archaeological theories. Search algorithms have been modified to prioritize conventional sources while suppressing alternative perspectives. The digital suppression operates through technological gatekeeping that reinforces traditional institutional control over acceptable knowledge. Government agencies have increased involvement in archaeological suppression as national security concerns are invoked to justify classification of controversial discoveries. Military installations have been established around significant archaeological sites to restrict access and prevent independent investigation. International agreements coordinate suppression efforts across national boundaries. The pattern suggests that the stakes of the suppression have increased, as accumulating evidence makes denial of ancient advanced technology increasingly difficult to maintain. The institutional response has evolved from passive dismissal to active concealment as paradigm-threatening discoveries accelerate in frequency and significance. Behind the modern suppression lies the recognition that acknowledging ancient advanced technology would fundamentally challenge contemporary power structures and institutional authority. If previous civilizations achieved technological sophistication comparable to or exceeding modern capabilities, then current institutions lose their claim to unique knowledge and progressive achievement. The implications extend beyond academic archaeology to encompass fundamental questions about the nature of human development, the cyclical versus linear progression of civilization, and the possibility that current technological achievements represent rediscovery rather than innovation. These questions threaten not just academic paradigms, but political and economic structures that depend on assumptions about progress and institutional necessity. The forbidden files in storage facilities worldwide contain more than just impossible artifacts. They hold evidence of human capabilities that powerful interests are determined to keep hidden. Each suppressed discovery represents another piece of a puzzle that reveals technological traditions, knowledge systems, and achievements that challenge everything we've been taught about human history and capability. The suppression continues because acknowledging the truth would require admitting that much of accepted history is wrong, that previous civilizations achieved technological sophistication that challenges modern assumptions, and that current institutions have systematically concealed evidence to protect their authority and credibility. But the evidence accumulates despite institutional resistance. Each new discovery adds weight to the forbidden files. Each leaked document exposes another aspect of the suppression. Each whistleblower account reveals the scope of concealed knowledge. The truth about ancient advanced technology cannot be suppressed forever, because the artifacts themselves don't lie, even when the institutions do. The forbidden technology files remain classified, their contents hidden from public view, their implications carefully suppressed. But the pattern is clear, the evidence is overwhelming, and the truth is emerging despite every effort to keep it buried. The question is no longer whether ancient civilizations possessed advanced technology. It's how long institutional suppression can continue to deny the obvious reality documented in storage facilities around the world.